Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? All right, let's get into it. This is the Vivo X50 Pro. We're going to start off with an unboxing of this bad boy, but just take a look at this. You can already see just how interesting this phone is because of this camera package. One of those sensors is really large, but it's not just about the actual sensor size, it's about what is around it, because this is a gimbalized, I guess that's the word I'm going to be using in this video. It has a gimbal built in. But I am going to bury the lead a little bit by just walking you through the unboxing before we get to a real-world camera test, as you know me to do. One thing to know is that despite this phone being called a Pro model, it does have the Snapdragon 765G. There are a few different colors of this phone, and mine's more like this bluish gray edition. Popping back over to the phone just for a hot second, you'll see that this matted glass backing actually shines real well, like I mentioned. But because it is matted, it's called the AG matte glass, AG standing for anti-glare. Fingerprints don't really seem to smudge it up too bad like on a glossy backing. That's something that I very much appreciate right off the bat. Another thing that you'll know I appreciate is that there is a clear case included in the box. Now, even though I do have to adapt it in order to take advantage of it, the charger is a 33-watt Vivo Flash Charge charger that powers the 4315 mAh battery. Rounding out the specifications are 8GB of RAM and 256GB of onboard storage. Just speaking on the handling for a second, I do like that it is pretty thin, but mostly that is because there are curves on the front and the back. And on top of that, this particular screen is an AMOLED screen with a 90Hz refresh rate, so it's nice to see that little bit of a higher end feature in this particular device. The screen is vibrant as you would expect from what they actually say is a Samsung AMOLED. Now, it is a full HD plus resolution panel, but it is one from Samsung. As Vivo says, this is a Samsung AMOLED, and I think it honestly shows. Colors are very vibrant. I'm having a good time watching pretty much any media on here, and I'll definitely be putting this phone more through its paces as far as things like gaming go. I'm going to save more of my opinions on the OS, FunTouch OS, in my final coverage of this phone, but a couple of things I did want to mention. Vivo obviously is still working on localizing their software for more markets, and it shows in this version of Android. It doesn't take away from the general experience. So far it's been very smooth, and obviously things look really nice on this 90Hz AMOLED display, so I think in general operation succeeds. But now we can finally get into the cameras, and again, I want to take a look at this rear camera module because the main sensor is this huge thing that has a gimbal installed on it. It is a 48 megapixel main sensor at f1.6 aperture, and it has their gimbal camera system. The other lenses are an 8 megapixel super wide angle, a 13 megapixel bokeh dedicated lens, and an 8 megapixel 5x telescopic zoom. Another bright and hot day in SoCal, but we're in a different location now. This is the Descanso Gardens next to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. So as we get into some of the early pictures from my walk at the Descanso Gardens, it kind of begs the question, what exactly is a gimbal most useful for when it's built into a phone? Well, one of the obvious answers is that for a phone like this, I don't have to bring any extra tools. If I want to do some walk and talks, or if I'm just trying to hold the phone steady, there are actually gimbals out there that you can buy made specifically for phones, and conceivably you don't really have to have those if you have a phone like the Vivo X50 Pro. And actually, one thing that you might notice throughout this video is that all of the video footage that I recorded is stabilized in some sort of way. Everything but the front-facing camera, of course. You have the gimbal camera system on top of OIS, or even electronic stabilization, and then there are times when you can just put them all together. So that's why I do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer as far as the variety of pictures you're going to see from this video. Unfortunately, the Descanso Gardens wasn't quite as varietal, let's say, in terms of the different subject matters I could take pictures of. There's so many benches and there's a lot of plant life, but it wasn't really curated in such a way that would allow me to get really good close-ups like you've seen in other videos before at the Huntington Gardens and at the LA Arboretum. But what Descanso Gardens definitely had were plenty of trails, and I wasn't exactly expecting to go on mini hikes throughout my day. That is a perfect situation though, where you can have a stabilized camera to make sure that your walking shots are going to be quite smooth. Here's a look at the wide angle when you're using it for video. Again, 1080p video. I'm still confused about where I'm going because you get these little maps along the way that tell you where to go. And then you kind of go in that direction, north, south, east, west, whatever the case may be. And then the path you think you're on just disappears. And then you get stuff like this where it looks like a path, but it's clearly like, I don't know, this is more of a hike than a trail or a park even. Some thoughts on the zoom levels. There is an 8 megapixel 5x telescopic zoom, which allows for an up to 60 times hyper zoom, as they call it. But of course, the zoom levels are something that you'll only take advantage of in certain situations. After my time with other phones that have used telescopic zooms, I'm convinced that it's not something I would use very often. But that's the reason why I go to places like Descanso Gardens, because sometimes an opportunity presents itself. And it looks like my little buddy ran away over there already, but there was finally a little bit of wildlife that I could zoom into using the zoom periscope camera. I was able to get up to 15 times zoom during that video, and they were like all the way over here. So I was able to get some squirrels in the shot, finally. Wanted to give a quick thought on the 13 megapixel bokeh lens that's on here. It's nice that a bokeh lens is here so that it can get the cutout just right, and also it's 13 megapixels, which is more than the ultra wide and more than the telescopic zoom. I don't know, their numbers are a little bit confusing to me, but this bokeh lens seems to do a really good job. Problem was, it was just me all day today, so the best thing I could do was just get onto the portrait mode, turn the phone around, and hope that I was getting the right framing. I did use my camera. You can see a shot of me trying to get the right framing, but after that you can change the bokeh level down to a level of like 0.95, so you have a lot of blur in the background. Then you can change up what the bokeh actually looks like in the background. I think I will have a couple of other opportunities to take pictures of people using the portrait mode on this phone. I don't know if masks are going to make that difficult, but we'll see what happens. Either way, I'll have more of those portrait shots for you with this 13 megapixel bokeh lens in a future video. Now let me preface this next part by just mentioning a quick tip for those of you out there who are using smartphones for creative purposes. Obviously, the more effort you put into being smooth yourself, the better your footage will turn out. You want to have better strides, you want to change up the way that you step, maybe not heel strike as much. And of course, you want to be slower with your pans rather than being jerky with the phone. You'll notice that I'm really putting in the effort still, even though I know that the camera itself or the phone itself can compensate for my movements anyway. And so far, that's one of the takeaways that I have with the Vivo X50 Pro is that stabilization is the name of their game right now, and it does enhance many different parts of their photo and video taking experience. But if you yourself are already smooth enough, this phone's gimbal camera system will only enhance that further, and I call that a win-win. I feel like I'm in some sort of like medieval period movie where I'm trying to find my way to the next village. There's just a little bit more fiddling in the camera app than I would like as far as quality of life issues are concerned. There are a lot of modes in the camera app, and it's great to see. However, I want to be able to stick to 4K recording as much as possible. The problem is when you go to, let's say, photo mode and you turn on the ultra wide angle and then go back to video, well, it has gone down to 1080p because it's trying to use the wide angle lens. I would prefer it to just default to the main lens every time I go to video so I don't have to worry about changing the resolution again. The same goes for the other modes, and one of them I wasn't really able to use. It's called the movie camera mode, where you hit the movie camera, you select one of your subjects, and then it will use AI in order to keep it framed properly as you move the camera around, which involves cropping, and it's already a 1080p video to begin with. Okay, I'm moving to the ultra stable mode, which uses the gimbalized lens and then crops in to add some electronic stabilization on top. I'm actually swaying a little bit just to show you the kind of movement that you're getting from it, but we're going to actually go on a little bit of a micro hike so you can actually see it in motion. Again, I'm not changing up my steps much at all. I'm heel striking to the floor, and it's kind of hard for me not to because this is uneven ground. Aside from that crop into the image, this also results in a 1080p video, but there's one other thing I wanted to mention about the nature of hyper-stabilized footage like this. Now, as I come up to this little installation and I walk by it and I move in order to keep it in the center of the frame, you'll see a difference in what jerky movements look like given a gimbal and electronic stabilization system like this. If you are making the effort to be smooth, the camera will make it look even smoother. But then, if you're moving even more in a jerky sense, trying to keep things in the middle, it will compensate a little bit too much. That overcompensation causes some real jumps. But where are there some extra places where a gimbal can come in handy? Well, that could also be in low light situations. We'll start off with the night mode, mainly because in the night mode you already get a long exposure of between 1 and maybe 5 or 6 seconds, but the gimbal can help you keep that image sharp by compensating for the little movements that you might make during that long exposure. Unfortunately, there's a little bit too much light pollution in my area, so I wasn't able to get a really nice starry night photo, but the night mode was already showing its colors quite well, quite literally even. Another place where a gimbal can help out is in lower light situations for video. Now, I don't mean in the pitch black of night, because if you can't see anything, then what's the point? But if you happen to be in something like an indoor situation, the slower shutter speed that is used to account for the lower light situation could mean you have some motion blur and you can have some stutters that actually happen in the video regardless of the way you're moving. A gimbal actually helps to alleviate a lot of those problems, so you can use slower shutter speeds as the camera will want to do when you hit the record button, but it will still be mostly smooth footage without those little shakes and motion blurs that typically happen. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this little slideshow of the photos and videos I was able to get with the Vivo X50 Pro, this real-world camera test where I'm just showing you the results and I want to hear what you think in the comments down below. If I had to give some preliminary thoughts on these, just ones that I've had after this long walk at the Descanso Gardens, I think that stabilization is kind of a new frontier, something that we can look forward to seeing more of if Vivo is going to pioneer it. It actually helps in a number of different situations, especially in video and especially in long exposure, let's say night modes, and ultimately I do want it to see implemented in one way or another in future phones so we can see it improve. But it does point to the reasoning why this phone is considered a pro model. Stabilization is going to be one of the features that differentiates this from pretty much every single smartphone, and you have to think for yourself if it's a feature you actually need in your daily life as a smartphone photographer, smartphone creative even. Does it work? Well, I would venture to say yes. It's nice to have a gimbal built into the hardware of the main sensor, and the lens is just wide enough so that you can fit plenty into the frame, even yourself if you wanted to, and the footage will be stable no matter what you do. I think there are plenty of things to think about in Vivo's next little iteration, or let's say evolution, because they do try their best with their mainline smartphones to introduce new features, like the waterfall display from the X3, and this time a gimbal camera in the X50 Pro. So I hope you enjoyed this, well, look, or let's say trek around the Descanso Gardens thanks to the Vivo X50 Pro. Let me know what you think about everything you heard or saw in this video in the comment sections down below. Tell me what you think the quality is like on here, give me your opinions, and let's have those discussions. At the very least, you can drop some likes on this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Consider hitting that bell over on the side so you can keep up with everything I'm doing on this and plenty of other releases that we can look forward to in the coming months. And with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for watching, take care of yourself and each other, and until my next video, I will just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.